My childhood friend and I have a daughter in the future, and she has traveled back to the present. She said that in the future, not only did I abuse her, but I also cheated on my childhood friend, later abandoning both him and her to elope with a wealthy man. So, she would rather disappear herself than allow me and my childhood friend to be together. I watched as she tried her best to match up my childhood friend with other girls, and I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. What she doesn't know is that I've already foreseen the future. Chapter 1. On the way home from school, my childhood friend and I were pulled into the alley behind the school by a girl. The girl was very pretty, but a bit out of her mind, insisting on calling me and my childhood friend mom and dad. I was silent for a moment, then reached out to touch her forehead. "Miss, are you all right?" She impatiently slapped my hand away and continued looking tearfully at my childhood friend. "Dad, everything I'm saying is true. I really am your daughter from the future." Ethan looked at her with a complex expression and said, "If you're sick, go to the hospital." Saying this, he grabbed my hand and started walking away. But the girl quickly grabbed the hem of his school uniform and spoke rapidly. "Is your phone password Olivia's birthday? Do you have a diary specifically for recording Olivia's preferences? Are you planning to confess to Olivia on her birthday?" I was stunned and quietly looked at my childhood friend beside me. The usually proud and arrogant young man was blushing unconsciously. He glanced at me quickly and, gritting his teeth, asked, "How do you know all this?" The girl looked a bit smug. "Because I'm your most beloved daughter." I hadn't noticed before, but now, carefully examining the girl's delicate features, I realized that her eyes indeed bore a strong resemblance to my childhood friend's. A thought struck me, and I asked her, "What's your name?" The girl seemed very reluctant to speak to me and answered dismissively, "Everly Lynn." Hearing this name, my heartbeat suddenly sped up, because I had once imagined that if I really married Ethan in the future and had a daughter, I would name her Everly, symbolizing everlasting memory. I hoped that Olivia and Ethan could stay madly in love even when their hair turned white. Looking at Everly's vivid expressions, a complex and indescribable feeling churned within me. Unconsciously, I reached out to touch Everly's hair, but she dodged me. When her gaze swept over me, it carried obvious disdain. "Dad, can you please stop liking Olivia?" Her tone was filled with genuine hatred. "You treat her so well, but she's never satisfied. In the future, not only did she abuse me, but she also cheated with a wealthy man. After you found out, they even injured you." Chapter 2. Ethan and I were both stunned. Perhaps because Everly spoke with such sincerity, Ethan couldn't help but get emotionally involved. He instinctively retorted, "Impossible. Olivia is a good girl." Everly looked at him with a mix of disappointment and frustration. "I've traveled back from the future. I know exactly what kind of person she is. You like her too much now, and that's why you're missing out on your true love." Ethan was about to continue arguing with her when a soft voice came from the alley entrance. Ethan?" As soon as Ethan saw who it was, his handsome face instantly turned cold, but Everly's eyes suddenly lit up. "Aunt Zoe?" I followed their gaze and saw Zoe standing at the entrance of the alley. She was wearing an oversized school uniform, with thick glasses that almost covered half her face. When she spoke, not only did she have a strong accent, but her braces were also visible. Everyone's first impression of her would be that she was very unremarkable. But it was this Zoe who had done something unimaginable. She once confessed to Ethan in front of everyone during a school basketball game. Ethan politely rejected her at the time, but this incident became a topic of gossip for the students, and everyone secretly mocked her for being delusional, ugly, and unrealistic. Everyone thought that Zoe would give up, but surprisingly, she didn't. From that day on, wherever Ethan appeared, you could see her shadow. Later, Ethan got tired of her sticking around and started giving her the cold shoulder, sometimes even making sarcastic remarks. But Zoe still didn't leave, continuing to chase after him. At this moment, Ethan wasn't giving her a good look either, pulling me along to leave. But as we passed Zoe, she grabbed his sleeve. Ethan looked at her hand, frowning. Zoe immediately let go and carefully took out 2 movie tickets from her backpack. "Ethan, can I treat you to a movie this weekend? Just as a thank you for helping me last time." Zoe came from a poor family, and combined with her thick accent, She was often teased at school for being a country bumpkin. It started as just verbal attacks. But after she confessed to Ethan, she completely angered one of the school's queen bees who secretly liked Ethan. So, the queen bee began to bully Zoe with her clique. After Ethan found out, he sternly warned the queen bee, which made them stop. Ethan didn't take the movie tickets and instead raised his eyebrows, asking, "You're barely able to pay your tuition, and you're wasting money on movie tickets?" Zoe's face flushed, and she lowered her head, speaking softly, "I earned this money by working part-time these past few days." Ethan froze for a moment, then looked away uncomfortably, his tone stiff as he said, "I'm busy this weekend. It's Olivia's birthday." Chapter 3. As Ethan held my hand and led me out of the alley, I looked back. I saw Everly stomping her feet in frustration, while Zoe was staring intently at my hand in Ethan's grasp. In her eyes, I saw intense jealousy and unwillingness, and even hatred. As Ethan's childhood friend, I not only had the advantage of being with him for a long time, but my family background and appearance also matched his. So people often used me as a tool to humiliate Zoe, but I didn't like it at all. After warning them many times, they finally stopped comparing me to Zoe. Zoe also confronted me once. She told me that I was just lucky. If she had my family background and looks, she would be the one standing beside Ethan. At that time, I was thinking about how to solve a math problem, but I still smiled and replied to her, "Zoe, instead of saying these things to me, why don't you go back and solve a few more problems? Since you can't change your circumstances, why not work hard to change your future?" Unfortunately, my heartfelt words were taken by Zoe as an insult to her poor academic performance, making her even more resentful of me. As my thoughts returned to the present, we had already reached the entrance of my building. Before we parted, I asked Ethan what he thought of Everly's story. He sneered, "Just because her last name is Lynn, she thinks she can pretend to be my daughter?" Then he secretly glanced at me, his ears turning a bit red. "Besides, our future daughter would never speak ill of you. She'd definitely be as sweet and well-behaved as you." My heart felt sweet, and I thought, was I just being too sensitive? Is time travel really possible? Maybe that name was just a coincidence. Perhaps it was because of the bizarre events of the day. But that night, I had a strange dream. I dreamed that I was sitting in front of an unfamiliar dressing table, holding my phone and about to send a message. I saw a message from someone named Michael, "Come away with me." And the message I had typed but not yet sent was, "Okay." I found it all too absurd and suddenly looked up, only to meet my own gaze in the mirror. The woman's features were still beautiful, but a deep fatigue lingered on her face, as if she had gone through a great ordeal. But before I could clearly see my surroundings, the alarm clock woke me up. It was time to get up for school. I sighed, thinking to myself, I must have gone crazy. Chapter 4. This weekend, my friends gathered together to celebrate my birthday. After we finished eating, we planned to go to the KTV to continue singing. While I eagerly anticipated the birthday gift Ethan was going to give me, I couldn't help but wonder if he would confess to me today. But Ethan was obviously distracted today, frequently checking his watch. When it suddenly started thundering and raining outside, he irritably stepped out to make a phone call. But when he came back, he still sat there, lost in thought. My initially excited mood was instantly dampened. I wanted so badly to ask him, wasn't he not interested in Zoe's invitation? Then why was he acting like this? My best friend Isabel noticed the tension between us, so she immediately picked a sweet duet and jokingly urged us to sing together. Ethan snapped out of his thoughts, looked at me tenderly, and said, "May Sir Lin have the honor of inviting Princessin to sing a song?" This was a game we often played as children. Ethan would play the knight who slayed the dragon, and I would be the princess who got kidnapped. Every time he rescued me, he shamelessly demanded a kiss. My mood lightened a bit, and I nodded. But just as Ethan and I were halfway through the song, someone suddenly burst in. It was Everly. Seeing her drenched clothes, I felt a strange pang of pity. Ignoring the surprised looks from everyone, Everly quickly walked over to Ethan and said, "Dad, you need to go save Zoe. She's been caught by her dad's creditors, and she's in great danger." Ethan froze for a second, and before Everly could react, He had already dashed out. My mind went blank for a moment, but my feet honestly followed after him. Outside, the rain poured down, and I struggled to keep up with Ethan, shouting his name loudly, but he never looked back, running faster and faster. Suddenly, I tripped and fell to the ground, accidentally cutting my calf on something. Blood dripped into the cold rainwater and quickly washed away. I bit my lip and stood up, cursing Ethan in my heart for not taking an umbrella with him when he left. But why didn't I bring one either? I thought bitterly, realizing that I must be just as crazy as he was. But when I dragged my injured leg to the entrance of the cinema, I realized that the only one truly crazy here was me. I watched as Ethan knocked down the debt collectors to the ground, and I watched as he pulled Zoe into his arms, holding her tightly, very tightly. Finally, I watched as he took off his jacket, placed it over both of their heads, and they ran off together. Chapter 5. Suddenly, an umbrella stopped over my head. I stared in a daze at Everly, who was standing next to me. In the night, her face appeared somewhat blurred, but her tone was unmistakably sarcastic. "See that? That's my dad's true love. And what are you?" I didn't pay much attention to her words and instead asked, "Aren't you cold?" Everly was stunned. She stared at me for a long moment before forcefully shoving the umbrella into my hand. What a foolish woman! With that, she dashed off into the pouring rain. I held the umbrella, standing there, feeling a bit lost. The warmth from Everly's hand still lingered on the umbrella's handle, but as the cold wind blew, it quickly faded away, just like my mood, which gradually turned cold. At that moment, a strange car pulled up beside me, and the window rolled down, revealing the face of my best friend, Isabel. She said, "Ollie, get in the car." My clothes were soaked from the rain, and I was worried about dirtying the car seats, so I hesitated. But Isabel urged me anxiously, so I had no choice but to open the door and get in. "Thank you, Issa." I finally came back to my senses from what had just happened. Isabel grumbled, "No need for thanks between us. And if you want to thank someone, thank my uncle. If he hadn't come to pick me up, I wouldn't have been able to catch up with you." So I quickly thanked the middle-aged man in the driver's seat. But Isabel suddenly burst out laughing. "You got it wrong, Ollie. Uncle Chin is our family driver. My uncle is the one sitting in the front passenger seat." Confused, I turned to look at the young man sitting in the passenger seat. From this angle, I could only see his tense profile. "Thank you," I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. The young man didn't seem very pleased and responded in a cold tone. "It's nothing." Isabel winked at me and whispered, "Don't mind him, Ollie. He's like this with everyone, always looking like someone owes him a fortune." I pressed my lips together, not knowing what to say, but the young man in the front seat spoke in a calm voice. "Isabel, if you don't want me to tell my brother about your failed test, you'd better keep quiet." Isabel made a face at him and was about to retort when she noticed the blood still dripping from my leg. "Oh no! Ollie, what happened to your leg? How did you bleed so much?" I was about to say, "It's nothing," but Isabel's uncle immediately told Uncle Chen, "To the hospital." After we arrived at the hospital, the doctor carefully cleaned the wound on my leg and prescribed some medicine. While Isabel went to get the medicine, her uncle and I waited in the lobby. The lobby was crowded, with hardly any seats available. My legs started to ache from standing too long, so I leaned on one foot against the wall. Just then, an arm suddenly reached out in front of me. Surprised, I looked at Isabel's uncle, who turned his head slightly away from me, his tone slightly awkward. "You can lean on me." Chapter 6. I didn't feel embarrassed at all and, after thanking him calmly, I leaned on his arm. After a while, he suddenly spoke again. "Olivia, do you really not remember me?" Under the light, I finally got a good look at Mo's young uncle's face. His features were like a work of art, meticulously carved and perfect. But those dark eyes seemed to reflect no light, always carrying a cold indifference. I searched my memory carefully but realized that apart from Isabel, I didn't seem to have any other connection with him. Isabel rarely mentioned her family, and tonight was the first time I realized her uncle was so young. So, I looked at him with some confusion. The young man lowered his eyes, seemingly a bit disappointed, and said, Qing High School, the third debater for the opposition. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I suddenly remembered the debate competition we had last year when I represented our school against Qinghai. The third debater on the opposing team didn't speak much, but every word hit the mark. Of course, I didn't back down either, and that debate turned into a standoff between the two of us. I remembered that the third debater's name was, I hesitantly called out, Michael M.O.? The young man finally smiled, like ice thawing in spring. But I couldn't smile back because I suddenly remembered that dream. Michael, wasn't he the one I was supposed to have an affair with in the future? When the M.O. family uncle and nephew dropped me off at home, Isabel pulled me aside, clearly worried. Ollie, what's going on between you and Ethan? I thought of the image of Ethan running off with Zoe, and it felt like a needle was piercing my heart. I forced a smile at Isabel and told her it was nothing, but deep down, I knew that I was starting to feel threatened by Zoe, someone I hadn't taken seriously before. Maybe because I got caught in the rain. I developed a high fever that night. In my delirium, I had another strange dream. In a dimly lit room, not a single ray of sunlight could penetrate. I was lying on the floor, watching in despair as a much more mature Ethan walked away. I don't know how long it took, but someone eventually pulled me up. That person's hand was noticeably smaller than mine, but their palm was incredibly warm. She led me downstairs and pushed me into someone's arms. That person's embrace was filled with a faint scent of oranges, and for some reason, this smell inexplicably made me feel very safe. When I woke up again, 2 days had passed. My mother was by my side, her eyes full of worry. After I assured her I was fine, she finally relaxed and handed me a bowl of porridge she had prepared. As I ate, I suddenly noticed a beautifully wrapped box on the bedside table. My mother told me, I don't know what's going on with you two. After you came home and collapsed, Ethan showed up looking completely disheveled. When he found out you had a fever, he stayed by your side all night, refusing to leave no matter who tried to make him. He left that box behind, saying it was your birthday present. I remained silent, not saying a word. When my mother went to wash the dishes, I opened the box and saw a delicately crafted necklace inside. The crystal swan on the necklace sparkled in the light. This was the necklace I had seen the last time Ethan and I went out, but I hadn't bought it because it was too expensive. I remembered that I hadn't shown much interest in it. I had only glanced at it a few times. So, how did Ethan know? Chapter 7. The next day. As soon as I stepped out the door, I saw Ethan standing at my doorstep. He carefully smiled at me and handed me a cup of soy milk, but I didn't take it. Instead, I walked past him and headed straight downstairs without giving him a glance. Ethan quickly caught up with me and tried to take my backpack. Of course, I wasn't going to let him have it, so we ended up tugging at it in the middle of the street. In a fit of pique, I let go, and Ethan, unable to control himself, fell hard on his backside. I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. Seeing me laugh, Ethan immediately got up and moved closer to me. He spoke softly. I'm sorry, Ollie. It was my fault. I shouldn't have left you there that day, and I definitely shouldn't have ignored you when you were calling out to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you're really mad, just hit me. He ended with a pitiful look. Just don't ignore me. I can't stand it when you ignore me. I looked at him for a long moment and said calmly, but I also saw you holding Zoe. Ethan panicked immediately. He grabbed my sleeve and said, she was really scared, so I just wanted to comfort her. I really don't have any feelings for her. Seeing my expression grow colder, Ethan grabbed my hand, his tone pleading. I was wrong, Ollie. You know I've always liked you. You're the one I want to marry. I was stunned because this was the first time Ethan had ever said these words to me. In the past, though we both understood our relationship, we had never had a proper confession. I had always wanted to hear him say he liked me, but now that he finally did, it didn't feel as good as I had imagined, probably because of what happened that day. I sighed and didn't respond to him, turning around and walking away. Ethan followed behind me, holding my backpack. For the first time, we didn't joke around on our way to school. When we arrived at the school gate, I saw Isabel getting out of a car. She noticed the strange atmosphere between Ethan and me and wisely didn't ask any questions. I linked arms with her, and just as the car door closed, I caught a glimpse of Michael sitting inside. His expression was still cold, especially when he saw Ethan beside me. The displeasure on his face was almost palpable. Suddenly, I became curious. How did my future self end up developing feelings for Michael to the point of eloping? Chapter 8. Time passed quickly. It seemed like Ethan and I had returned to our old ways. Maybe it was because we had grown up together, and we had long since integrated each other into our daily lives. It wasn't easy to break away, but I could clearly feel that my affection for Ethan was slowly fading. When did I first realize it? Probably when Zoe stopped coming to school for a while. I noticed Ethan often staring absent-mindedly at the classroom door during breaks. After playing basketball, he would subconsciously look around for someone. He would even unintentionally write Zoe's name on a piece of paper, only to angrily crumple it up and throw it away. Habits are a scary thing. For example, I was used to having Ethan by my side, and now Ethan was also used to having Zoe, who always followed him around. Watching his confusion and struggle, I wanted to tell him, "If you care so much, just go find her. And besides, my feelings aren't something cheap. Once Ethan exhausts them all, I'll leave without looking back." Even though I thought this, my heart still ached. The turning point came one afternoon. I was reading under the gardenia tree by the school field when Ethan angrily came looking for me. As far as I could remember, he rarely got mad at me. The few times he did were because I didn't listen to him and ended up getting hurt. But this time was different. It was because of Zoe. Ethan threw Zoe's diary at my feet and demanded, "Olivia, why did you say those things to her?" He looked at me with disappointment in his eyes. "I already told you I don't like her. Zoe has been keeping her distance from me. So why did you go behind my back and humiliate her?" I quietly watched Ethan's hysteria and then picked up the diary. As I read it, I couldn't help but laugh. Zoe claimed that not only had I humiliated her behind her back, calling her shameless for always chasing after Ethan, but I had also incited others to bully her. She even mentioned the time we met alone when I told her to go home and study. She wrote, "A casual remark from someone standing high above can make the mud already stuck in the dark feel even more worthless. Maybe I shouldn't even exist in this world." I tossed the diary back to Ethan and said calmly, "Do you really believe her?" Ethan leaned against the tree and gave a bitter laugh. "Does it matter if I believe her or not? Olivia, Zoe has depression. Who would joke about something like that?" I didn't say a word and instead slapped Ethan across the face. He froze for a moment, and when he realized what had happened, he grabbed my wrist tightly and said, "Olivia, you need to own up to your mistakes. I've tolerated your temper before, but this is different. This is a matter of life and death. Come on, you're coming with me to apologize to Zoe." I tried to shake his hand off, but when I couldn't, I slapped him with my other hand. "Those things weren't even done by me. Believe what you want, but if you think I'll apologize to her, think again, in your next life." As I turned to leave, tears began to fall uncontrollably. How did it come to this? Chapter 9. Ethan started visiting Zoe's house every day, claiming he was going to take care of her and apologize on my behalf. When I heard that, I felt so disgusted I almost wanted to throw up. I know Ethan too well. He's just using me as an excuse so he can openly go see Zoe. Ethan's family lives just above mine, so occasionally, I run into him on the stairs when we're going to school. Every time, he looks at me as if he wants to say something but doesn't. I know what he means. He wants to reconcile, but I think he's being naive, unwilling to let go of Zoe, yet unable to part with me. Pure foolishness. Today, I was at home working on some practice problems when my phone started buzzing nonstop. I opened the messages and saw that someone had sent me a lot of photos of Ethan and Zoe. In the photos, Ethan is smiling gently at Zoe, his gaze filled with emotions even he might not realize. And Zoe, as if she knew I would see the photos, smiled provocatively at the camera from an angle where Ethan couldn't see her. So, where does she look depressed? My fingers tightened around my phone as I waited for the person on the other end to say something. Fortunately, they quickly sent another message. "Mom, it's time to say goodbye to your 17-year-old heart." Next, I'll tell Ethan a truth that will make him leave you for good. It was Everly. I wasn't too concerned. Just curious about how terrible my future self must have been for Everly to be willing to sacrifice herself to stop me and Ethan from being together. But her efforts weren't in vain. The outcome she desires is indeed about to happen. However, whenever I think about Everly disappearing, my heart aches. Could it really be the blood bond that's affecting me? Everly was very efficient. The next day after school, Ethan pulled me into an empty classroom. Of course. Besides the two of us, Everly and Zoe were also there. Ethan didn't waste any time. His eyes were red as he immediately questioned me. Ollie, when we spent that summer in the countryside as kids, and I accidentally fell into that deep pit, who was it that saved me? I was momentarily stunned before I realized what he was referring to. Back then, Ethan had just started middle school and had an accident on his way to school, which left him unable to stand for a long time. During that period, his temper became volatile and unpredictable. He would throw things in a rage whenever things didn't go his way, so no one wanted to get close to him anymore, including Uncle Lin and Aunt Lin, who avoided him whenever possible. But I was foolish enough to think that Ethan was just too sad, and if I stayed with him until he could stand again, he would eventually return to being the gentle Ethan I knew. So, I endured his bad temper and started accompanying him for his rehabilitation training every day. Sometimes, I would tell him jokes to cheer him up. Of course, I also didn't forget to explain the school lessons to him every day. During that time, I made 2 sets of notes, but Ethan still had a sullen face. Until that summer when we went to his grandmother's house in the countryside. I remember that day clearly. For some reason, he insisted on pushing his wheelchair out alone. But as the evening approached and he hadn't returned, I grew anxious and went out to look for him, only to find him lying next to a deep pit. I hurriedly called out his name, and he slowly regained consciousness. When he saw that it was me, he pulled me into a tight hug, his eyes red. I'll listen to you. I'll live well. Chapter 10. At this moment, Ethan was still looking at me in anguish, waiting for an answer. I said, I don't know. At that time, all I found was you lying next to the deep pit. Zoe, however, looked at me with tears in her eyes. You're clearly lying. You tricked Ethan. If it weren't for you, how could Ethan and I have missed out on so many years? I thought he always remembered me. I looked at them coldly and said each word slowly. I'll say it again. I really don't know who saved him. When Ethan woke up, he didn't say anything. So how could I know what happened to him? I added mockingly. Besides, I never claimed I was the one who saved him. Whatever he imagined. What does that have to do with me? I, Olivia, would never stoop to stealing someone else's credit. Enough. Ethan finally couldn't take it anymore. He looked at me with deep disappointment. Ollie, Olivia, all these years, it turns out I've been in love with the wrong person. I was silent for a long time before I suddenly laughed. Ethan, I'm really curious. If it had been a dog that happened to pass by and saved you, would you have fallen in love with it too? If so, your love is incredibly cheap. Cheap enough that he doesn't deserve me. Everly was right. I really should say goodbye to my 17-year-old heart. In the end, Ethan left, dragging a sobbing Zoe with him. As for me, I leaned wearily against the wall, my mind in a mess. A soft sound suddenly caught my attention, and I quickly turned around. I saw Everly, whom everyone had forgotten, standing in the corner with blood streaming from her nose. Panicked, I reached for my phone to call for help, but she stopped me, with no other choice. I took her to the bathroom to clean up a bit. After leaving the school, I noticed Everly standing there, lost in thought. I felt an inexplicable pang of sorrow in my heart, and on an impulse, I walked back to her. Would you like to stay at my place tonight? I asked directly, and she hesitated, but thankfully, she agreed. When we got home, my mother had already prepared dinner and was sitting on the couch with my father, waiting for me to return. I told them that Everly was a classmate of mine and would be staying over tonight. They both agreed without any issue, even holding Everly's hand the whole time, clearly liking her a lot. It was rare to see Everly, usually so prickly, behaving so quietly and obediently. Suddenly, my mother exclaimed, Now that I look closely, Everly's nose and mouth really do resemble Ollie's. And that little mole on her nose, Ollie used to have one too. But she had it removed. I was stunned and looked at Everly, who was also looking at me with a complicated expression. At first, I had only noticed how much Everly looked like Ethan, but now I realized she had features that resembled mine too. It was a feeling that was hard to describe. Besides my parents, there was someone else in this world who was so closely related to me by blood. Afraid that my parents might suspect something, I quickly pulled Everly back to my room after dinner. Maybe because she was sleeping beside me, I had an unusually long dream that night. Chapter 11. In my dream, Ethan and I got married. He still treated me like a fragile treasure, just as he did when we were kids. We had many sweet moments, and it really felt like we were always in love, just as I had imagined. But then we had our first argument after getting married. It started because he didn't want me to go back to work after we had our daughter. We had a fierce argument, one that even involved our parents. Because of this, Ethan didn't come home for several days. But in the end, he was the first to apologize. He was very upset and told me that he didn't want me to be so exhausted, taking care of our daughter and working at the same time. He said he could fully support me, and all I needed to do was be his princess. I softened and eventually agreed, fully dedicating myself to our family. At first, Ethan would come home on time and often brought me various gifts. But gradually, he started coming home later and later, and I began to notice unfamiliar perfume scents on him. Suspicious. I decided to surprise him at work one day, only to catch Zoe laughing and chatting with Ethan, her arm linked with his. In the dream, Zoe was no longer the timid girl from high school. She had taken off her thick glasses, applied delicate makeup, and appeared confident and poised. When they saw me, they quickly pulled apart. Zoe greeted me, but I ignored her and looked directly at Ethan. Ethan was clearly flustered. After sending Zoe out of the office, he held my hand and tried to explain. At first, Ethan felt guilty toward me. That gradually turned into impatience, and he even started comparing me to Zoe. He said I wasn't as strong as Zoe, not as confident and composed. At that time, my mother was hospitalized with an illness, and the stress was overwhelming. When he said that, I broke down completely. It was during that period that I met Michael. He was my mother's attending physician. He told me, "Olivia is Olivia. You don't need to compare yourself to anyone else." Just that one sentence brought me back to life. At the end of the dream, I saw Michael reaching out his hand to me. He said, "I've always been here. You just need to turn around to see me." This dream felt incredibly real, making me start to believe that this might be my somewhat tragic future. When I woke up, there were still traces of dried tears on my face. I looked up and saw Everly sitting at the table, staring intently at a photo. In the photo, I was holding hands with my parents, smiling brightly. "Everly, why did you lie to me?" I suddenly asked. Everly was startled and snapped out of her thoughts, staring at me in shock. I gave a bitter smile. "It was Ethan who cheated, wasn't it?" Everly jumped up from her seat. "How did you know?" I didn't answer her. Instead, I looked into her panicked eyes and asked slowly, "Why did you come back? Do you really hate me that much? Would you rather disappear just to make sure Ethan and Zoe end up together?" Everly lowered her head, making it hard to see her expression, but her voice trembled slightly. "Yes, I hate you the most." With that, she ran out of the room. My fingers clenched painfully. I couldn't understand why she would do this. Chapter 12. Ethan and Zoe are together now. When I found out, I was attending Isabel's birthday party at the Mo family's house. Finding a random excuse, I slipped away from the lively front hall. The pitying looks from everyone made me uncomfortable. After all, who would have thought that Zoe, whom everyone once looked down on, would actually manage to win over the most popular boy at our school? And this was despite Ethan having me, his childhood friend. Unknowingly, I wandered into the Mo family's small garden, where I happened to see Michael sitting on a swing, reading a book. A gentle breeze ruffled his dark hair, revealing those ever-calm eyes of his. He had a box of candies on his lap, and it looked like he had already eaten more than half. I couldn't help but smile. This young master had an unexpectedly endearing side to him. Perhaps hearing my footsteps, Michael looked up. When he noticed me smiling at his candy, his ears suddenly turned red, but he still tried to act composed. "Do you want some?" I nodded and took a candy from him, then sat on the swing next to him. Suddenly, I remembered that dream. I asked him, if in the future I become insignificant, losing all my light, would anyone still like me? I knew my question was a bit odd, but Michael still answered me seriously. Of course. My heart started to race, and I asked, why? Michael smiled, a smile that was like bright stars twinkling in the night sky. I'll never forget the first time I saw Olivia, with her confident and composed eyes. During that debate, even though your team was at a disadvantage, you kept defending your points with such determination. You might have lost, but you won everyone's applause. I always believed that someone like you would never become ordinary. Even if you experience setbacks, you'll always rise again and reclaim your brilliance. Michael looked into my eyes, his voice gentle, but honestly, no matter how many people love you, it's more important to love yourself first. Never doubt yourself because of what others say. My eyes grew warm, but my heart felt suddenly clear. Looking up at the blue sky, I softly said, "Thank you, Michael." After the party, I took Isabel to the amusement park as another birthday treat. We had an amazing day, running around like crazy and feeling incredibly happy. On the way home, Uncle Chin came to pick us up, along with Michael, but Isabel had to leave early to attend a private birthday dinner her parents had arranged for her. I didn't want to trouble them by asking for a ride home, but Michael suddenly placed a pair of bunny ear headbands on my head. Come on, it's no trouble. But as soon as we got to my building, I saw Ethan and Zoe. They were standing close together, whispering sweetly, just as they were about to kiss. Ethan suddenly spotted me. For some reason, he immediately pushed Zoe away and looked a bit flustered. Zoe's expression changed instantly, but she quickly linked arms with Ethan and looked at me with a smug smile. How coincidental, Olivia. Then she glanced at Michael beside me, her expression faltering as her eyes filled with complex emotions. You found someone new so quickly? Well, that's good. So you can stop pining over someone else's boyfriend. When Ethan heard her say that, his brows furrowed deeply, and his tone inexplicably grew cold. Ollie. Who is he? I didn't want to engage with them, but I was too disgusted to ignore it. What does it matter to you? And stop calling me Ollie. I glanced at Zoe's twisted face and raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't want to upset your girlfriend. With that, I turned to leave, but Ethan blocked my way, demanding an explanation. Michael immediately stepped in front of me, towering over Ethan by half a head. His gaze was sharp, and his presence intimidating. Ethan had no choice but to let me go, though he stared at me with resentment. Michael flicked the bunny ears on my head and chuckled softly. Get going, little bunny. My face flushed inexplicably, and I quickly headed upstairs. Chapter 13. That evening, Ethan knocked on my door. He stood outside with his usual smile, his tone light and cheerful. My parents aren't home tonight. Can I have dinner at your place? In the past, I would have happily dragged him inside, but now, looking at his face only filled me with irritation. Ethan, don't you think you're being ridiculous? Don't tell me you're with Zoe now, but still haven't let go of me? Ethan kept his smile, but there was a flash of pain in his eyes. Ollie, so we can't even be friends anymore? No, we can't. I rejected him firmly and then slammed the door shut. After a moment, I opened the door again. Ethan's previously dim eyes suddenly brightened. He was about to say something when I threw a box at his feet. These are the things you've given me over the years. I'm returning them to you. You don't need to return what I gave you. I don't want them anymore. Ethan stared at the box. Stunned, he bent down and picked up the topmost item. Inside was a crystal necklace, with the swan pendant still shimmering in the light. He asked me, and this? You don't want it either? You used to love it so much. I looked at him calmly and said, it's different now. It's tainted. The Ethan who once understood my thoughts with just a glance was no longer there. I didn't tell him that I had noticed he secretly ate instant noodles for a month to save money, so he will never know how much I once wanted to grow old with him. As I closed the door, I saw Ethan clutching the necklace tightly, his face filled with confusion and pain. Chapter 14. My life seemed to have returned to how it was before. Except now, there was no Ethan, but there was Michael. Michael would give me a ride home whenever he picked up Isabel, and he would also invite me to the library to study on weekends. Finally, after yet another invitation to the library, I couldn't help but ask him, "Michael, are you courting me?" Otherwise, with his personality, he wouldn't be so proactive about inviting the same person repeatedly. He looked confused. Yes, isn't it obvious? I was speechless. Who goes on dates at the library every time? And the way he seriously debates different math problem solutions with me only makes it seem like he sees me as a study rival. I sighed, stood on tiptoe, and whispered in his ear, "How about we go to the beach next week? I heard there'll be fireworks at night." Michael's face instantly turned red. He pressed his lips together and nodded vigorously. I finally smiled with satisfaction. Just after Michael dropped me off at home, a heavy rain started to pour. As I watched the downpour, I thought to myself, I haven't seen Everly in a long time. Or maybe, is she still around? A sense of loss welled up in my heart, tinged with a faint bitterness. "Ollie," a voice suddenly came from behind me. I turned around and saw Ethan. His expression was sorrowful, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope. "Ollie, I broke up with Zoe." I paused for a moment and then said indifferently, "That has nothing to do with me. You didn't need to come all the way here to tell me." I was about to head upstairs, but Ethan suddenly hugged me from behind. A faint smell of alcohol lingered in the air. I frowned, feeling disgusted. "Ethan, let go." Ethan's voice was choked with sobs. "Ollie, I was wrong. I realize now that I've always loved you. I can't stand living without you. Can you forgive me?" By the end, he was sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt nothing. I simply stomped on his foot. As he let go in pain, I stood on the stairs, looking down at him. "Honestly, Ethan, what you're doing now is just sick and disgusting." Thinking about what he would do with Zoe in the future, my resentment toward him grew even stronger. "Ethan, maybe I should thank you for leaving me." Without looking at his pained expression, I turned and walked away, but out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in the pouring rain. I was excited to get a better look at her face, but she disappeared in the blink of an eye. I smiled bitterly, wondering if I'd been thinking about her too much lately. Chapter 15. Ethan was caught by Zoe's family's debt collectors. They were intent on getting revenge, so they were very rough with him. He was hit in the head and was rushed into surgery. My mother told me the news while I was discussing summer vacation plans with Isabel. As I stared at the red light above the operating room, I remembered the message Ethan had sent me just a few hours earlier. "Ollie, summer is almost here. How about we go to the beach together?" Since our last meeting, he had been messaging me every day, but I never replied. I even blocked him. He didn't know that I already had someone to go to the beach with. Ethan's parents were sitting on the bench outside the operating room, crying. My parents were trying to comfort them, but they were also wiping away their own tears. I found myself staring blankly at the white walls of the hospital, hoping that Ethan would be okay. I hated him, but I didn't want him to die. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, I saw Everly in a white dress. I walked over to her, and she took my hand, giving me a gentle smile I had never seen before. "Mom, today is my birthday. Can you make me a bowl of noodles again?" I hesitated, looking into her expectant eyes, but eventually, I agreed. I borrowed the kitchen of a nearby small restaurant and quickly made Everly a bowl of noodles. The steam blurred her features, making it hard to see her expression. But then she suddenly spoke. "I'm the one who told those people where Ethan would be." She looked up at me. "I'm the one who caused Ethan to end up in the hospital, hanging between life and death." I stared at her, a flood of questions rushing to my mind. I wanted to ask, "Weren't you always helping Ethan? Didn't you always hate me? So why did you do this now?" But in the end, I just felt exhausted. Everything Everly did and said always seemed beyond my understanding. Perhaps today had drained too much of my energy, because I fell asleep with my head on the table, and then I had a dream, one I hadn't had in a long time, about the future. But this time, it was all about my daughter, about Everly. I saw her as a newborn, her big eyes sparkling like grapes as she smiled at me. I saw her at 5, holding a clay cake she made when Ethan forgot my birthday, singing happy birthday to me. I saw her at 10, proudly declaring at a parent-teacher conference, "I have the best mom in the world." I saw her at 13, holding a knife against her father after Ethan found out I wasn't the one who saved him and slapped me for Zoe. And finally, I saw her at 15. She went to the hospital to find Michael, looking at him seriously. "If you ever treat my mom badly, I won't forgive you." Michael, dressed in his white coat, didn't laugh at her slightly childish words. Instead, he bent down and offered his pinky finger. "I understand. Let's make a pinky promise." Everly linked her pinky with his and smiled brightly. After leaving the hospital, she deliberately went to a secluded place and took out an old-fashioned phone. "Okay, if you can really take me back to the past, then take me back to before my dad confessed to my mom." Magically, the phone spoke. "As you wish, but why didn't you just tell your mother about the future? Why did you choose to push them apart by discrediting her?" Everly was silent for a long time before she finally smiled. "You don't know my mom. She's the kindest, most soft-hearted person in the world. If I didn't make her hate me from the start, she would have stopped me. She might even have gone down the same path again. For my sake." Now, I finally knew Everly's biggest secret. She loved me. She had always loved me. My tears suddenly started to fall, and I tried to reach out and grab the daughter from my dream. But she kept drifting further away, choking back sobs. I watched her become more and more transparent. "Everly, would you still want to be my daughter in the next life?" She looked at me, her smile innocent. "Of course I would." Everly might not be a kind girl, but she was always a good daughter to her mom. I shook my head and finally forced myself to smile. "I'm sorry. And thank you." When I woke up, I saw the empty seat across from me, and my face was wet with tears. I knew that this journey through time, filled with love, had finally come to an end. Chapter 16. The doctor said that although Ethan's life was saved, it would be very difficult for him to wake up. I heard that when he was rushed to the hospital, covered in blood, he was still tightly clutching that crystal swan necklace. As I listened, I found myself staring blankly at the sky. In the distance, Isabel waved at me, smiling as she said, "Ollie, come join us at the beach." Next to her, Michael also looked at me with gentle eyes. I stood up and ran toward them. "Let's go!" The following summer, I graduated along with all the other seniors. As the heat of summer faded, I, along with them, stepped into the university campus. 4 years later, I graduated with honors from the law school and smoothly became an excellent lawyer. Michael and I also got married, much to the satisfaction of both our families. My favorite pastime was teasing Isabel by making her call me auntie. Every time, she would chase me around, complaining about how I ended up on Michael's pirate ship. 3 years after our marriage, I got pregnant. Michael respected my choices, telling me that I could continue working if I wanted to or stay at home if that was what I preferred. He would shamelessly tell me, "I'll quit my job if I have to." Anyway, now that Isabel is in the company, I'd rather stay home and be your house husband. When Isabel overheard this, it always led to a hilarious commotion between the uncle and niece. At 7 months pregnant, my mother told me that Ethan had woken up. She said, "After all those years together, if you have time, you should go see him." I was silent for a moment before nodding. One weekend, Michael and I went to the hospital, where I unexpectedly ran into Zoe in the lobby. I remembered that Zoe had to drop out of school because her family's debt collectors frequently caused trouble at the school. I heard she didn't take the college entrance exams and instead went to a small town to work and pay off the debts. Looking at Zoe now, I saw her dressed in faded, worn-out clothes, holding the hand of a little boy, looking tired and worn out. But when she saw me, she still showed the same resentful expression as before. "Olivia?" She clenched her fists in frustration. "Why? Why do you have such good luck? Why isn't it you who's fallen on hard times?" I found it amusing. During the time she needed to work hard the most, she wasted her time competing with me over Ethan, even neglecting her studies. Now that her life hadn't turned out well, She blamed others for their good fortune. I didn't think it was worth engaging with her, so I took Michael's hand and walked away. Chapter 17. When I reached Ethan's hospital room, I saw him staring out the window, lost in thought. Time had left its marks on his face, but the gloom in his eyes vanished the moment he saw me. In a trembling voice, he called out, "Ollie." I had completely let go of the past and nodded at him, but just as a small smile began to form on his lips, he saw Michael behind me, and then he noticed my rounded belly. Ethan looked at me with sorrowful eyes for a long time. Finally, he closed his eyes and softly said, "Ollie, I wish you happiness." I placed a hand on my belly and gave him a heartfelt smile. "Thank you." 3 months later, I gave birth to a daughter. Her eyes were as bright as stars, and she was so tiny, nestled in Michael's arms, making my usually cold and serious husband's expression soften without him realizing it. But when I noticed the small mole on her nose, my eyes suddenly filled with tears.